Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be how to use value. How to use value shading, light and dark, to shade our bottle. First off, we want to make sure that while we're doing this, and everybody in class should just be looking up and paying attention to the board. While we're doing this in class, I want you to realize that every bit of this bottle has a shade or a value. The more subtle changes we can find from light to dark, the more realistic it's going to look. When we look at all that shading and everything else like that, we want to try to treat the very brightest part of the bottle, even though it's slightly gray in your photograph on the computer screen, the very brightest area here will be white, okay? And then as we go across, the darkest area is sort of in the middle, okay? As we get to the other side, it gets a little sort of lighter gray. This is not going to be jet black, but it's going to be our darkest value in here, up in here, and sort of across the middle. What we have is light coming from one side, that's primary light, and then it bounces off the table, comes back, and this is secondary light, which sort of lightens up this side of it. It's sort of like a reflected area. So none of your bottles should look like, hey, it's just white on this side and black on that side. We want to look for variety. When I'm working, what I like to do is I like to work with the pencil kind of on its side a little bit. That way I can get sort of a smooth mark on it. When I'm working, I tend to try to shade left to right, okay? Trying to follow the shape of the bottle. I try not to go up and down like this or zigzags or crosses. I try to do it very neatly, and really the smoother you put it down on the paper, the better it's going to look when it's done. I'm starting with a little value on the top, and all I'm going to do is just use my finger to sort of blend it into the paper a little bit. I can always clean up the edges later on with an eraser. I'm going to look at the very top of this bottle has sort of a medium to light gray on it, and I'm going to shade that in first. This edge on the curve of the bottle tends to be one of the darker areas, so I'm going to start with a little bit of darkness, probably the darkest value I'm using so far, and then I'm going to shade left to right in the darkest spot, which is right over here. To the left of it, there is that residual bounce back secondary light, so I'm just going to go a little bit lighter, and then right here on the edge of this and this, I'm just going to kind of try to fade that out with my pencil to start with. I'm not going to make this side too dark. Then with my finger, I'm going to sort of blend a little bit of that in, just to kind of smooth it out a little bit. It's not going to be perfectly smooth, but at least it takes a little bit of the edge off of that. And again, I'm going to come back in. I'm going to try to blend in what I just did, maybe darken in a little bit of that center part, and sort of work it out neatly to the edge. This little undercut piece between the cap and the bottom, well, that's one of the darkest spots on my bottle. So that's an area where I'm going to come in and really kind of color in relatively dark. That's about the darkest as anything's going to go. And again, this sort of segment from the ring of the cap, that's going to be very much similar to what I just did above on the cap. Again, I'm going lighter here. I'm going a little bit darker in the middle. And I would tell you this, is that when you're working, you can always make things darker. Coming back and erasing things and making them lighter, well, that's a little bit more challenging. So I would tell you that if you're going to make a mistake, you can always make it a little too light and fix it later. Whereas if you go really, really dark and really, really heavy, well, that becomes a problem that's hard to fix later on. Underneath my cap, I have a little bit of shadow, a little bit of shading to work on. That shading kind of takes a hard edge shape. It kind of picks up a little bit right. This pencil is not as good as the last one, but it takes up a little bit right underneath, and it's sort of that little segment right here that I'm working on. It's one of the darker parts. Again, it's a little bit lighter out here towards the edges. Again, I can kind of blend that in just a little bit with my finger. I'm going to keep this side pretty bright for the most part, but I will try to make a soft transition. When I say a soft transition, I mean that it kind of gradually goes there, that this doesn't look like an eclipse where it's like perfectly etched shadow. Through this top part over here, I'm going to work on this section again. I'm working shading left to right. Try to do it the same way I'm doing it. I'm trying to show you not just the way I would do it, but a way that works for showing the form of the bottle. And the idea of value is that we're able to show roundness and three-dimensional shape. What I'm doing is I'm trying to very lightly put down my pencil mark. Again, you're always going to see some of the scratchy marks from your pencil, but the smoother you put it down here, the smoother it will look. I'm going to start a little bit too light in the beginning because I know that after I blend this, it'll probably get a little lighter and I can come back and darken it up. I'm going to look that in my shadow. It might be hard to see on the projection, but this area, if you look at the photograph that's on the upload in the assignments or the physical copy, right here is really dark. Down here gets a little bit lighter. So I'm going to start by filling that in just a little bit darker and then trying to put in a little light gray. And again, I want this to look pretty good without even blending it, but once I get my value down, then I'm going to come in and kind of smooth a little bit of that out, kind of fading out the edge of this so it looks like it blends softly from the white edge to the sort of darker area. And again, you'll notice that my drawing is probably going to be a little bit lighter than the photograph. That's totally fine. I shaded left to right. When I started blending, I kind of changed directions a little bit. That way it makes it look a little more smooth. Now that I've sort of smoothened that out, I can really come back and sort of assess and see that, okay, right through here could be a little bit darker. And if you make it too dark too fast, your finger gets really dirty, and then when you start blending, everything turns to gray. We don't want that to happen. We want to kind of be able to control our shading over here. So what I'm doing is I'm just adding a little bit more. Naturally, pencils are silver. The pencil lead is sort of silvery. So no matter what you do, your shading is going to be a little bit more gray than the bottle is anyway. That is perfectly fine. I'm just looking for a soft transition from one side to the other. I'm looking that this side gets a little lighter as we go out to the edges. And you can always punch up your darkest areas with a little bit more value as you're working. All right. Now I'm going to start working in towards that transition area. Again, the bottle has a form. The shadow isn't just straight up and down this picture. It changes, it turns, it curls. So I'm going to kind of look for what's happening in that area. Again, I'm shading left to right, adding a little bit more right there, and working my way down. You should and will take longer than I am doing this. I've had a little bit more experience. I've done this bottle drawing way too many times. So the idea of you doing this drawing inside 10 minutes is probably a little unrealistic. I would like you to take your time and just be accurate and sort of find that soft nuance and blended out look. I'm going to start by making a lot of this gray and trying to put it down evenly. Notice there's a difference in the way I'm shading like this. This is pretty good. This would not be good. All right, if your shading looks like that, try as you will, it's hard to blend that out. But if you put it down evenly, you can sort of smooth that out pretty well. So it should look like you don't need to blend it before you blend it, and blending should just be like a finishing touch, not trying to like fix all that. If you're shading like this and it's really rough and really jagged, it's always going to look that way. But if you put it down smooth, it will stay smooth. I will continue to look for those subtle little changes in light and dark, like my bottle's a little bit darker right through here. And again, I'm trying to put down that darker value very smoothly. I'm going to work this all the way through. As it goes down towards the bottom, the shadow kind of fades out, especially in the center. It's not as dark, and it sort of picks up a little bit right here on the underneath part. So I'm going to come in and add a little bit more darkness right in there. I'm going to come in and add a little bit more darkness right through here. Again, the more variation in light and dark, the more little subtle shades of gray that you see and you find, the more realistic it's going to look ultimately. And again, your version ultimately, like mine, will be a little bit lighter or considerably lighter than the photograph. I don't want to see a jet black picture of the shading on the bottle. What I do want to see is that it looks round, it looks like a bubbled out form. You do see the subtle changes in light and dark throughout it, and I do want to see a pretty cleaned up drawing. So we're going to do this to our finished bottle. We are going to clean it up, We are going to fix any of the errors that might be there that you want to fix. After blending it, you might find that you have to clean up the outside. You can also add that shadow underneath, a little something to make it stand up off the page. I do not want you to do the background, but I would like you to do the shadow. I think I've given you a precise methodology on how I'd like you to do this. Take your time, work top to bottom, work left to right. Try to put it down, your pencil marks, as evenly as possible. That way it will look smooth and blended and really refined as you're working. If you work sloppy, it will look sloppy. If you work neat, it will work neat. I myself, this is about 10 minutes. I would probably still work on this and make things darker, but I'm going to leave this as your example. Notice that I didn't make this side dark. This is all pretty much the white, but notice how it fades nicely. It fades across the bottle to the dark. You don't see a jagged shape. Like, don't make a shape for the shadow and then color that shape in. Make it fade in and out. I'm looking for subtle fading. I'm looking for a variety of values inside there. I don't want the little marks on the top of the cap, but I do want the shading. I want to see that you can see areas like the top are a little bit darker than the areas near the bottom, and then I want you to add the shadow into it. I'm going to post this video. Unfortunately, it usually takes like 10 minutes or so to post, so it will be up by next period. I'm going to allow you guys to start working now. We only have at home another 8-9 minutes. In class we have a little bit more. So this has been Shading the Bottle with Mr. B.